You know, people exaggerate numbers all the time in ancient history, but not this time. There really was a king who marched almost 2 million people into a single military campaign, and the confidence behind that decision still feels unbelievable, even by today's standards. Back in 612 AD, the mighty Sui dynasty of China, under Emperor Yang Di, launched an invasion of Goguryeo on a scale the world had almost never seen before. How does a 7th century empire, without radios, without telegraphs, trucks or railroads, organize, direct and feed a human mass the size of an entire country? How do you deliver food to every unit, secure fresh water, and keep supply lines alive over hundreds of miles? It really seems impossible when you think about it. But Yang Di had the kind of bold, almost dangerous ambition that made him believe he could force it to work. In his mind, this was supposed to be simple, a colossal superpower flattening a tiny frontier state. Goguryeo unleashed one of the most devastating ambushes in all of military history, an operation so precise and so brutally efficient that fewer than 2,700 Chinese soldiers made it home. That's a loss rate of more than 99%. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you can probably already guess why. But let's see if your guess is right. Welcome to Heroic History, your daily spot for forgotten battles, surprising twists, and the turning points that reshaped entire empires. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button so we can keep bringing you these epic stories every single day. So, what exactly happened at Salsu? Why Emperor Yang Di committed to a campaign far beyond the technological limits of his time? How Goguryeo created the perfect kill zone at the Salsu, and how hundreds of thousands of men vanished in what felt like the blink of an eye. Let's get into it. After centuries of being split apart, warlords, rival kingdoms, constant fighting, the Sui dynasty finally unified the whole region. And with that unification came a very old belief, almost a tradition. If you want to be a true empire, a real empire, you have to deal with your independent neighbors. There was no friendly neighbor policy. You either forced them into submission or eliminated them entirely, and standing right in the way of that dream was Goguryeo. Goguryeo controlled the entire stretch of land between China and the Korean peninsula. Strategically, it was like a giant locked door, and every time China tried to push outward, Goguryeo was the one blocking the hallway. That made them the biggest geopolitical obstacle the Sui had to confront. Emperor Yang Di, who inherited both the throne and this expansionist mindset, was convinced there was only one solution. He wasn't interested in negotiations or gentle pressure. He wanted a decisive blow, something so massive that no one could possibly resist it. So in 612 AD, he decided to launch a campaign so big, so unbelievably massive, that it still makes historians shake their heads today. He believed raw numbers would be enough, sheer size, a tidal wave of manpower. And that tidal wave, it was 1.13 million frontline soldiers. Now pause with me for a second. Imagine a football stadium holding 70,000 people. Multiply that by 16. That's roughly the number of just the soldiers. And once you add the supply crews, engineers, pack workers, camp builders, wagon drivers, everyone needed to keep that monster army alive. The total swells dangerously close to 2 million people on the move. A human tide stretching across the horizon. Yang Di personally led the main assault. That meant every general under him felt enormous political pressure. Deliver fast results, don't question the plan, don't slow down. And when commanders operate under fear instead of strategy, well, you can guess where this is heading. This giant force, meant to guarantee victory, was already turning into a liability. The bigger the army, the heavier the logistical burden. And the longer the campaign took, the faster that burden would crush them. Let me explain. Moving 1.13 million men across hundreds of miles meant you needed a supply network so strong it might as well have been a second army. Every single day, each soldier needs water, grain, and some sort of protein. Then you add the horses, tens of thousands of them, all needing fodder. When you do the math, the daily supply requirements turn into something almost impossible to visualize. You're looking at thousands of tons of food and water that somehow had to be moved across rough terrain, using nothing more than pack animals, carts, and human labor. Most people think the Sui marching this gigantic army across endless dry land because they simply chose to. But the truth is, the Sui fully intended to rely on the Navy. In fact, the Navy was supposed to be the backbone of the whole operation. Without it, the campaign should have been impossible from day one. Ships were the only practical solution, so what went wrong? In fact, Emperor Yang Di gathered one of the largest fleets East Asia had ever seen. Tens of thousands of ships, and depending on how you count all the troop transports, supply barges and auxiliary craft, it may have been even more than that. The whole idea was beautifully simple on paper. First, the fleet would sweep out of the Bohai Sea right off the northeast coast of China. Then it circles around the big hook-shaped Loang Peninsula, and once it's behind Goguryo's defensive belt, they land. Boom. Now Goguryeo is trapped between two massive forces, one Sui army marching overland and another army suddenly showing up behind them from the sea. If the plan worked, this wasn't supposed to be a multi-year slog. This could have been over in a few months. But Goguryeo wasn't blind. They knew exactly what Yang Di was trying to pull off. Goguryeo had been fighting Chinese dynasties for generations, and they knew their geography like the back of their hand. And the coastline up there, it's brutal. We're talking about narrow inlets that funnel ships like a bottleneck. Shallow waters where a single wrong turn can beach a galley, winds that change direction like someone flipping a switch, rocky shelves waiting just beneath the waves, and landing zones so tight that you can't unload tens of thousands of troops without creating chaos. For a huge fleet like the Suis, this was one big natural obstacle course, and Goguryeo made it even worse. They reinforced the coastline so heavily, it almost felt like a medieval version of barbed wire. Stone fortresses stood right above the landing beaches. Walls and towers were positioned to unleash volleys the moment any ship got too close. Catapults were set up to smash vessels before they even reached the shore. Archers waited safely behind earthworks, and patrol boats moved through the narrow channels like blades hidden in the dark. So when the Sui Navy finally reached those choke points, they were sailing directly into a perfectly prepared ambush. Historical records, Chinese and Korean alike, describe total chaos. Storms came crashing in without warning, ripping ships apart. GS tipped and rolled in the shallow waters, some capsizing before they could even adjust their course. In the tight, crowded channels, vessels smashed into one another, turning the fleet into a tangle of broken holes. Then came the fire arrows, whole sections of the Navy suddenly erupting into flames, lighting up the coastline. Every attempt to land ended in disaster. Officers were cut down almost as soon as they set foot forward, and whatever formations remained simply dissolved before anyone had a chance to regroup. It was such an embarrassing defeat that later writers sometimes tried to soften the numbers. And just like that, every single soldier had to be supplied by land. But what kind of land routes were available? Rough dirt trails. The army squeezed through mountain passes so narrow only a few wagons could move at once, turning every mile into a bottleneck. Down in the valleys, swampy ground swallowed wheels and animals alike. Even the bridges were a problem. Crude wooden crossings that snapped under the weight of heavy caravans. Road crews worked non-stop just to keep the routes barely usable, and still they fell behind. And all of this had to support supplies being dragged hundreds of miles forward. And this is where Goguryeo showed just how well they understood the situation. They didn't rush into a big, glorious battle. Instead, they fought the campaign on their terms, slowly, patiently, and with precision. They used time and space as weapons. They let the Sui march deeper and deeper into their territory while quietly stripping the land bare. They used scorched earth tactics, destroyed bridges, emptied villages, blocked passes, and forced the Sui to crawl forward while running out of food. Wells were poisoned, fields went up in flames, grain stores were stripped clean, livestock vanished into the hills. The Sui army wasn't moving through a country anymore, they were moving through a wasteland. Every day the army marched, the situation got worse. Whatever supplies they brought were shrinking by the hour, and every step deeper into enemy territory stretched their supply line thinner and thinner. It was the perfect counter to a mega army. Without local food, the Sui had to carry everything. And at this scale, everything was impossible. And if the supply problem wasn't bad enough, the Sui army itself was cracking from the inside. A huge portion of that 1.13 million wasn't made up of volunteers or seasoned soldiers. They were conscripts, many pulled from their homes by force. And when men don't want to be there, you get low morale, low discipline, and almost no loyalty to the commanders leading them. Combine that with hunger, exhaustion, and disease, and people start slipping away. Desertion became a constant problem. Units shrank before they even reached enemy territory. Some soldiers simply collapsed from exhaustion. Others walked off into the night and never came back. By the time these men got anywhere near the region of modern-day Pyongyang, their combat readiness had already taken a massive hit. It was Yulji Mundok, the Goguryeo commander, fighting the Sui not on the battlefield, but on the supply line. He understood exactly where the Empire's weak spot was, and he hit it again and again. The Sui couldn't even secure the key strategic points they needed in Liaoyang. Those fortresses slowed them down, bled their resources, and forced them to burn precious time. And remember, every extra day on the road meant more food consumed, more horses dying, more soldiers collapsing. That delay fooled Emperor Yangdi into thinking his commanders weren't being aggressive enough. He wanted results fast. So he pushed his generals to split the force, sending 302,000 men ahead as a spearhead to rush toward Pyongyang, and that decision sealed their fate. This advanced guard was already the farthest from the supply hubs, so they were the first to feel the full weight of hunger and exhaustion. The emperor's pressure to move faster only made things worse. By the time they reached the Salsu River, these men weren't a powerful army anymore. The Goguryeo commander Yulji Mundok understood something the Sui commanders didn't understand about themselves. They were aggressive, impatient, and under huge political pressure to win quickly, especially guys like Yu Zhongwen, high-ranking, ambitious. So he starts putting on a show, a masterclass in controlled retreat. Every time the Sui advanced, his troops pulled back just enough to make it look like they were on the verge of cracking. And each time the Sui tried to open communication or negotiate terms, you deliberately delayed, respond late. It sounds simple, but it required incredible discipline from his own troops. Think about it. Your army sees the enemy pushing hard, and they have to retreat and retreat without panicking, without breaking ranks. It's the exact opposite of what most commanders would have done, but that discipline was the glue holding the trap together. As the Sui vanguard kept moving forward, over 300,000 men in that front group alone, they pushed so far beyond their supply support that the whole formation stretched thin like an overextended rubber band. And once a force that large outruns its food, water, and communication, the clock starts ticking. And Yulji knew it. Instead of running, hiding, or playing purely defensive, Yulji used his own capital, Pyongyang, as bait. He let the Sui commanders see it almost within reach, sitting right there in their line of sight, the walls, the gates, the almost there finish line. Imagine marching hundreds of thousands of starving, exhausted men and finally seeing the enemy's capital right in front of you. At that point, turning around felt like admitting you ruined the entire campaign. So, the Sui kept pushing forward even though the logistics were collapsing right under their feet. And all the while, Yulji kept sending these polite little notes to Yu Zhongwen. Promises to surrender, offers to negotiate, vague hints that he was ready to give up. But every message moved just slowly enough and said just little enough to keep the Sui commanders hanging on, watching their army wear down day by day. And while both sides were circling around what they wanted, one waiting for surrender, the other waiting for collapse, let me show you why the Salsu River, known today as the Chayon, became the perfect stage for one of the biggest military wipes in East Asian history. It wasn't just bad luck for the Sui. When you look at the terrain, the water depth, the narrow valleys, the floodplain, it all starts to make sense, almost too much sense. So imagine the Cheongchan. At certain stretches, the river widens out, but the key section where the ambush happens sits between natural bottlenecks. Tight riverbanks that force an army into a long, cramped line. You have steep slopes in some places, shallow mudflats in others, and then that narrow point where thousands of men can only cross in a slow, steady trickle. Now combine that with tired soldiers, heavy armor, hungry horses, that river was the perfect trap. Yulji Mundok picked Salsu because he knew the Sui vanguard had to cross it on the way home. Everything narrowed toward that single crossing like a giant funnel carved by nature itself. If the Sui wanted to survive, they had to go through that one point, and Ugji made sure that point would be hell. That's the moment where a normal military defeat turned into an outright catastrophe. A dam or water control structure that had been holding back an enormous amount of water upstream. And once that gate went down, the river became a weapon, a sudden wall of water slamming into an army that's already halfway across the river. Men carrying 40 to 60 lb of armor and weapons suddenly lose their footing, horses collapse, supply wagons overturn. The back of the army presses forward, not knowing what's happening at the front. The whole formation twists into chaos. And here's the part that really shows the genius of Yulji Mundok. He didn't get lucky. Goguryeo had clearly prepared the Salsu crossing months, maybe even years in advance, as an ideal death funnel. Remember, Goguryeo in the 6th and 7th centuries was famous for its water control systems. They built wood and earth embankments, agricultural reservoirs, floodgates, and temporary blockage structures. These are recorded in the Samuk Sagi and confirmed by archaeology. So at Salsu, what they likely constructed was either a timber-reinforced earthen dam, or a water gate holding back accumulated rainwater, or even a temporary agricultural flood control embankment. The upstream portion of the river narrows into a natural choke point, a perfect place to trap water. Something sturdy enough to store a massive volume of water, but weak enough that soldiers could break it open the moment the signal was given. When you suddenly release that stored water through a narrow channel, it doesn't come down as a gentle surge. It hits like a mini tsunami. So, the disaster at Salsu wasn't simply caused by the exhaustion of the Sui army or the mistakes of their commanders, though definitely contributed. And in just a few minutes, a river turns into a blender. That's why the casualty rate wasn't normal. Not even close. A traditional battle might kill 10%, maybe 20% if things get really ugly, but a 99% casualty rate. That tells you immediately this wasn't sword-to-sword combat. This was panic, drowning, men pinned under mud, crushed under logs, or swept downstream with no chance to swim out. When the formation finally broke apart, the survivors, wet, exhausted, and half in shock, stumbled right into the waiting ambush forces on the far bank. Of the 305,000 Sui soldiers in the vanguard, 302,000 never made it back. Only 2,700 survived. It's numbers like these that tell the real story. This was annihilation. When you look at the famous number from the Battle of Salsu, 302,000 Swiss soldiers dead, the first instinct is to ask, can that possibly be real? And honestly, that's exactly where any serious investigation has to start. So you go back to the main source, Sima Guang's Shitongjian, a massive historical compilation that stitched together earlier records, court documents, and military reports. But here's the thing. Sima Guang lived hundreds of years after the event. He wasn't holding fresh battlefield logs. He was working with texts that had already gone through political filters, dynastic agendas, and a whole lot of storytelling. Were these numbers originally written by the Sui themselves, trying to downplay their own incompetence? Or did they come from later writers who wanted to glorify Goguryeu's victory or highlight the collapse of the Sui dynasty? Because both sides had a motive. Goguryeo had every reason to turn Salsu into a national epic. "We destroyed 302,000 invaders" is the kind of number that builds legend. But the Tang dynasty, the successor to the Sui, had an even stronger political incentive. They wanted everyone to believe the Sui had lost the mandate of heaven, that their fall wasn't just random misfortune. And nothing says, "Your dynasty is doomed," quite like losing almost an entire field army after wasting 1.13 million troops on a catastrophic campaign. So even if the number was rounded, even if it drifted a little through time, it still reflects something historically real. The scale of the disaster was so enormous that chroniclers across generations agreed it had to be recorded as a near-total wipeout. And that's where the military analysis gets interesting, because when you compare Salsu to other famous battlefield collapses, Carrhae with Cassus, the Roman defeat in the Tudberg forest, or Hannibal's double envelopment at Kar, you start noticing something. None of them come close to a 99% casualty rate. Cana devastated Rome. Sure, roughly 50,000 Roman soldiers killed in a single day, but tens of thousands still escaped. Tudberg, 3 legions annihilated, but auxiliaries and survivors still made it back. Carrhae, a humiliating defeat, but nowhere near total destruction. And that's why historians take the 302,000 figure seriously. Because the scale makes sense once you understand the army's condition and the nature of the trap. Those 2,700 survivors? They were likely the ones on horseback, the healthier officers, the soldiers who happened to be just far enough from the river when the dam broke. They are the ones who staggered back to report what happened, bringing home stories so horrifying. When that tiny group returned and told the emperor what they saw, it shattered whatever faith people still had in imperial leadership. You can practically imagine the impact. From an army of hundreds of thousands to a few thousand hollow-eyed survivors who could barely explain how the rest vanished in minutes. The rest of the campaign, still nearly 800,000 men, immediately fell apart. Morale collapsed. Officers lost direction. The emperor's entire invasion plan, built on overwhelming numbers, suddenly had a hole you could march an army through. That loss crippled the Sui military system from the inside. These weren't local militias or frontier garrisons. This was the empire's elite strike force. Many frontier posts across China suddenly had no troops to man them. The empire became hollow overnight. And then the financial collapse kicked in. You have to remember, the whole invasion force had been 1.13 million men when the campaign began. Feeding, transporting, arming, and organizing that many people wasn't just expensive, it was economically destructive. Massive forced labor projects, entire provinces stripped of men and animals. The economy stretched to the breaking point. Once the disaster was undeniable, taxes went up, labor quotas rose, people revolted, and the emperor kept demanding more soldiers for new invasions as if pretending nothing had changed would fix the situation. It was the perfect recipe for collapse. Rebellions exploded after Salsu, because if you were just an ordinary farmer or a tired soldier in the Sui Empire, you could feel the pattern forming long before the officials in the capital admitted anything was wrong. Local communities start to buckle. Fields go untended. Families starve. And anger, real, dangerous anger, begins to spread. Then come the uprisings. One province rises up, then another, then another. It's like watching sparks catch dry grass. Once it starts, you can't stop it. And here's the real issue. The Sui government can't put these rebellions down anymore. Not after losing their best troops. Not with their supply lines shattered. Not with an economy drained by the cost of mobilizing over 1 million men. And this chain of events leads straight to the turning point. Everybody remembers the collapse of the Sui dynasty and the rise of the Tang under Li Yuan. Goguryeo didn't just win a battle, they created a symbol. Salsu became proof that even the largest empire in the world could be stopped cold. For decades, Goguryeo used this victory as a shield, politically, militarily, diplomatically. It forced the new Tang dynasty to treat them far more cautiously than they might have otherwise. And Yulji Mundayok's strategy, the slow retreat, the scorched earth, the psychological manipulation, the use of water control as a battlefield weapon, became a blueprint. Generals across East Asia studied this campaign. They learned that if your enemy is bigger, you don't fight them head-on. You use time, terrain, resources, logistics. You let their own size become their weakness. Salsu rewrote the strategic map of the peninsula. It shaped how Tang approached its neighbors for decades, and it helped preserve a three-kingdom balance, Goguryeo, Bikj, and Silla, that kept the region politically complex and fiercely independent. That's the real legacy of Salsu, a single tactical victory with an enormous geopolitical shadow. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more stories like this, battles, strategies, and the hidden decisions that shaped our world, make sure to stick around. Hit that like button if you learned something new. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And if you really want to help this channel grow, drop a comment about which battle, empire, or historical figure you want to see next. I read every single one. And your suggestions genuinely shape the next videos on this channel. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one tomorrow.